In a small village, a cat named Whiskers discovered a magic fish in a pond. The fish promised 3 wishes in exchange for its freedom. Whiskers wished for endless fish, a cozy bed, and a bell that rang softly. The fish granted all 3 wishes and swam away, leaving Whiskers caught. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of the downtown police station. Inside, Officer Marcus Johnson leaned back in his chair, laughing loudly at something his partner, Officer Steve Rodriguez, had just said. The break room buzzed with the usual morning chatter, but their conversation had taken a cruel turn. "Did you see that old man yesterday?" Marcus said, wiping tears from his eyes. "Standing there in that fancy suit, acting like he owned the place. Who does he think he is?" Steve nodded, grinning. "Yeah, asking all those questions about police procedures and community programs. Like we have time for every old-timer who walks in here with complaints." The man they were talking about was Walter Thompson, a 72-year-old African-American who had visited the station the previous afternoon. He had walked in wearing his best navy blue suit, the one he saved for church and special occasions. His hair was gray and neatly combed, and he carried himself with quiet dignity despite the aches in his joints. Walter had come to the station with genuine concerns about the neighborhood watch program. His street had seen several break-ins recently, and as someone who had lived in the community for over 40 years, he wanted to help make it safer. He had also hoped to discuss ways the police could better connect with elderly residents who often felt forgotten. But when Walter approached the front desk that day, Officer Johnson had been dismissive from the start. "What can I do for you, Pops?" Marcus had said, not looking up from his paperwork. The tone was condescending, treating Walter like a burden rather than a concerned citizen. Walter had patiently explained his concerns, speaking slowly and clearly. He talked about Mrs. Henderson next door, who was afraid to leave her house after dark. He mentioned Mr. Garcia down the street whose car had been broken into twice. He suggested that perhaps the police could hold a community meeting to discuss safety tips for senior citizens. "Listen, old man," Steve had interrupted, walking over to join the conversation. "We're pretty busy here with real police work. Maybe you should talk to your family about moving to one of those retirement homes if you can't handle living in the real world." The other officers in the area had chuckled at Steve's comment. Walter's face had shown hurt, but he maintained his composure. "I understand you're busy, officers. I just thought maybe we could work together to help the community." Marcus had rolled his eyes dramatically. "Work together? Sir, with all due respect, what exactly do you think you can contribute? You probably can't even use a cell phone properly, let alone help with modern police work." The laughter from the other officers had grown louder. Someone made a joke about Walter needing a magnifying glass to read the fine print. Another officer mimicked an elderly person walking slowly, exaggerating, a hunched posture and shuffling steps. Walter had stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of their mockery. He had served his country in Vietnam, worked as a teacher for 30 years and raised 3 successful children. But in that moment, he felt small and unwanted. Without saying another word, he had turned and walked out of the station, his dignity intact but his heart heavy. Now the next morning the officers were still finding humor in the encounter. "The look on his face when you said that about the retirement home," Marcus said to Steve. "Priceless. These old folks need to understand that times have changed." Officer Sarah Chen, who had been quietly listening while reviewing case files, finally spoke up. "Don't you think you guys were a little harsh?" He seemed like he genuinely wanted to help. "Come on, Sarah," Steve replied. "You know how it is with these elderly people. They come in here with their outdated ideas and waste our time with problems that aren't really problems. We've got real crimes to solve." Sarah frowned but didn't push the issue further. She had noticed the hurt in Walter's eyes the day before, and something about the whole situation didn't sit right with her. The old man had been polite and respectful, and his concerns seemed legitimate. The conversation was interrupted when Sergeant Williams entered the break room. "All right, everyone, listen up. Chief Patterson wants to see Johnson and Rodriguez in his office. Something about a complaint that came in." Marcus and Steve exchanged glances. "Probably that old guy from yesterday," Marcus muttered. "Bet he went Home and called to complain about us not taking him seriously. Whatever, Steve shrugged. What's he gonna say? That we didn't have time to hold his hand and listen to his boring stories about the good old days? As they walked toward the chief's office, other officers made jokes and comments. Better watch out, guys. The senior citizens are organizing against you, someone called out, causing another round of laughter. The police station continued its normal rhythm of activity. Phones rang, officers came and went on patrol, and paperwork was processed. But none of them knew what Chief Patterson had discovered about Walter Thompson. None of them knew about the phone calls he had made that morning, or the files he had pulled from storage. Chief Patterson sat in his office, staring at his computer screen with a mixture of amazement and growing anger. The background check he had run on Walter Thompson revealed information that made his stomach turn with embarrassment and shame. This wasn't just any elderly citizen who had been treated poorly by his officers. Outside his office door, he could hear Marcus and Steve approaching, their voices still carrying traces of amusement about their encounter with Walter. Chief Patterson closed the files on his desk and took a deep breath. What he was about to tell them would change everything, not just for Johnson and Rodriguez, but for the entire department. The intercom buzzed. Chief Patterson, Officers Johnson and Rodriguez are here to see you. Send them in, the chief replied, his voice steady but his jaw tight with tension. What his officers were about to learn would be a lesson they would never forget, and one that would reshape how they viewed both their jobs and the people they were sworn to protect and serve. And purring in the sun, Officer Marcus Johnson knocked on Chief Patterson's door with confidence, expecting nothing more than a routine conversation about a minor complaint. Officer Steve Rodriguez stood beside him, still smirking about their encounter with Walter Thompson from the day before. Come in, Chief Patterson called out, his voice unusually serious. The two officers entered the spacious office, noticing immediately that their chief wasn't his usual relaxed self. Chief Patterson was a tall man in his 50s with graying temples and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Today, those eyes held an intensity that made both officers suddenly uncomfortable. Take a seat, gentlemen, Chief Patterson said, gesturing to the chairs in front of his large oak desk. The office walls were covered with commendations, photos with city officials and certificates of achievement. But today the atmosphere felt heavy and tense. Marcus and Steve sat down, exchanging quick glances. Chief, if this is about that old man yesterday, we can explain, Marcus began, his voice still carrying a hint of dismissiveness. Chief Patterson held up his hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Before you say anything else, I want you both to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, and I want you to think about every word you spoke to Walter Thompson yesterday. The use of Walter's full name caught both officers off guard. Usually, Chief Patterson referred to citizens by their case numbers or simply as the complainant. The fact that he knew the man's name suggested this was more serious than they had anticipated. Chief Patterson opened a thick folder on his desk and pulled out several documents. Tell me, officers, what do you know about the Medal of Honor? Steve shifted uncomfortably in his seat. It's the highest military decoration, Chief, given for acts of valor in combat. That's right, Chief Patterson nodded. It's awarded to service members who distinguish themselves through conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of their own lives above and beyond the call of duty. He paused, letting the words sink in. How many Medal of Honor recipients do you think are still alive today? Marcus frowned, unsure where this was leading. I don't know, Chief, maybe a few hundred? Fewer than that, Chief Patterson replied. Much fewer. And yesterday you two had the privilege of meeting one of them. Walter Thompson received the Medal of Honor for his actions during the Vietnam War in 1968. The color drained from both officers' faces. Steve's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the reality of what their chief was telling them began to sink in. Chief Patterson continued, his voice growing colder. Sergeant Walter Thompson, as he was known then, was 26 years old when his platoon came under heavy fire near the Mekong Delta. When his commanding officer was killed and half his unit was wounded, Sergeant Thompson took command. Despite being shot in the shoulder, he single-handedly held off enemy forces for over 6 hours, allowing evacuation helicopters to rescue his wounded comrades. He pulled out a black and white photograph from the file and placed it on the desk where both officers could see it. It showed a young Walter Thompson in military uniform, standing at attention as he received his medal from the President of the United States. But that's not all, Chief Patterson continued, his voice now filled with barely controlled anger. After the war, Mr. Thompson came home and dedicated his life to public service. He became a teacher in our city's most challenging schools, working with at-risk youth for 30 years. He volunteered at the Veterans Hospital every weekend. He organized neighborhood watch programs and community cleanup events. Steve tried to speak, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. Chief, we didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't bother to ask, Chief Patterson interrupted sharply. You saw an elderly black man and made assumptions. You saw someone trying to contribute to his community and dismissed him as a nuisance. Marcus felt sick to his stomach. The image of Walter Thompson standing in the station lobby, patiently explaining his concerns while they mocked him, played over and over in his mind. He remembered the hurt in the old man's eyes, the way his shoulders had sagged slightly when they laughed at him. Chief Patterson pulled out another document. Mr. Thompson also served on the city council for 12 years. He was instrumental in getting funding for the new community center and the after-school programs that have kept hundreds of kids off the streets. He's received commendations from 3 different mayors and was named Citizen of the Year twice. The chief stood up from his desk and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Do you know what Mr. Thompson was trying to discuss with you yesterday? He wanted to propose a program where senior citizens could help patrol their own neighborhoods, serving as extra eyes and ears for the police department. He had already organized a group of 20 volunteers, all retired professionals with skills that could benefit our community policing efforts. Steve put his head in his hands, feeling ashamed and embarrassed. Chief, we made a terrible mistake. A mistake? Chief Patterson turned around, his eyes flashing with anger. A mistake is filling out the wrong paperwork or forgetting to file a report. What you two did was show complete disrespect to a man who has given more to this community and this country than most people give in 10 lifetimes. He walked back to his desk and pulled out one more document. This morning, I received a call from Mr. Thompson, not to file a complaint, mind you, but to apologize for bothering the officers and to ask if there might be a better time to discuss his community safety ideas. Both officers felt the weight of their actions settling heavily on their shoulders. The man they had ridiculed and dismissed had been concerned enough about their community to call back and apologize for trying to help. Chief Patterson sat back down and looked directly at both men. Mr. Thompson represents everything we should aspire to as public servants. He spent his entire life serving others, putting himself at risk for his fellow soldiers, dedicating decades to educating children, and continuing to work for community improvement well into his retirement years. Marcus finally found his voice. What can we do, Chief? How can we make this right? That, Chief Patterson said grimly, is exactly what we're going to figure out. But first, I want both of you to understand the full scope of what happened yesterday and what Walter Thompson means to this community and this country. Chief Patterson reached for another file folder, this one significantly thicker than the first. As he opened it, photographs spilled across the desk, showing Walter Thompson at various community events over the decades. In one photo, he was reading to a group of children at the library. In another, he was helping to build a playground. There were images of him at veterans events, always in the background, never seeking attention. Let me tell you more about the man you dismissed yesterday, Chief Patterson said, his voice heavy with disappointment. After Walter Thompson returned from Vietnam with his Medal of Honor, he could have chosen any path in life. He had job offers from major corporations, speaking opportunities, and book deals. Instead, he chose to come back to this city and work in the most challenging elementary school in our district. Marcus and Steve sat in stunned silence as the chief continued to reveal details about Walter's life that made their treatment of him seem even more shameful. Lincoln Elementary School, where Mr. Thompson taught for 30 years, was in the heart of the most troubled neighborhood in our city. It was where kids came to school hungry, where many didn't have proper winter coats, where academic achievement seemed impossible. But Walter Thompson saw potential in every single child who walked through those doors. The chief picked up a newspaper clipping from 1985. This article talks about how Mr. Thompson started a breakfast program, paying for food out of his own pocket when the school district couldn't fund it. He also began staying after school every day to tutor struggling students, never charging a penny for his time. Steve's hands were trembling slightly as he processed this information. He thought about how they had mocked Walter's offer to help, how they had suggested he was too old and out of touch to contribute anything meaningful. But his work didn't stop at the school. Chief Patterson continued. Every Saturday morning, for 25 years, Walter Thompson volunteered at the Veterans Hospital. He would spend hours with veterans who had no family visitors, playing chess, reading letters from loved ones to those who couldn't see well enough to read them themselves, and simply listening to their stories. The chief pulled out a letter with official letterhead. This is from the hospital administrator, written when Mr. Thompson finally had to reduce his volunteer hours due to his arthritis. It states that in his 25 years of service, he never missed a single Saturday except when he was hospitalized himself for a heart attack 3 years ago. Marcus felt his throat constricting as he remembered their jokes about Walter needing to move to a retirement home. Here was a man who had continued serving others despite his own health challenges, and they had treated him like a burden. The community center that your own children probably use for summer programs, Chief Patterson said, looking directly at Marcus, exists because Walter Thompson spent 2 years attending every city council meeting, organizing petition drives, and rallying community support. When the funding fell short, he organized bake sales, car washes, and community dinners to raise the remaining money. The chief stood up again and walked to a wall covered with photographs of police department events and community partnerships. He pointed to one photo that showed a group of police officers working with children at a summer camp. That youth outreach program that won our department a state award last year? The one that's been so successful in reducing juvenile crime? That was Walter Thompson's idea too. He proposed it to my predecessor 8 years ago and helped design the entire curriculum. Steve looked up sharply. That was his idea? Not only his idea, but he volunteered to help implement it every summer until his health started declining. Those kids you've seen at the summer camp, learning about police work and community service, half of them were taught by Walter Thompson, at some point during their elementary school years. The weight of their actions was becoming unbearable. These 2 officers who had joined the police force to serve and protect their community were realizing they had treated one of the community's greatest servants with contempt and disrespect. Chief Patterson returned to his desk and pulled out a medal from a small velvet box. It was the Bronze Star, another military decoration. Mr. Thompson also received this for his actions in a separate engagement where he risked his life to save 2 fellow soldiers who had been trapped in a burning vehicle. He set the medal on the desk where both officers could see it clearly. The man you mocked yesterday has more courage and honor in his little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. While you were laughing at him, he was planning ways to make your jobs easier and your community safer. Marcus finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. How many people know about all of this? About what he's done for the community? That's the remarkable thing about Walter Thompson, Chief Patterson replied. He never seeks recognition. Most people in this city have no idea about his Medal of Honor or his military service. They don't know about the countless hours he's volunteered or the programs he started. He does everything quietly, without fanfare, simply because he believes it's the right thing to do. The chief sat back down and looked at both officers with a mixture of disappointment and hope. Yesterday, when you suggested he move to a retirement home, you were talking to a man who owns his house outright because he's been saving money his entire life to leave something behind for the community. Programs he supports. Steve put his face in his hands. We are such fools, Chief. We completely misjudged him. Yes, you did. Chief Patterson agreed bluntly. But the question now is what you're going to do about it. Mr. Thompson called this morning, not to complain about his treatment, but to ask if there might be a better time to discuss his neighborhood safety proposal. Even after being humiliated in front of your colleagues, he's still thinking about how he can help make this community safer. The chief leaned forward, his expression serious but no longer angry. This is a defining moment for both of you as police officers and as human beings. How you handle this situation will determine not only your futures in this department, but also what kind of men you truly are." Marcus and Steve exchanged glances, both understanding that their casual cruelty toward Walter Thompson had revealed something ugly about themselves that they needed to confront and change. Chief Patterson closed the files on his desk and leaned back in his chair, studying the two officers who sat before him in obvious distress. The silence in the room was thick with shame and regret, as Marcus Johnson and Steve Rodriguez absorbed the full magnitude of their mistake. "I want both of you to understand something very clearly," the chief said finally. "This isn't just about one incident with one citizen. This is about the fundamental attitude and approach you've shown toward the people we're sworn to serve. Walter Thompson just happened to be the person who exposed a much deeper problem." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Chief, what can we do to make this right? We need to apologize to Mr. Thompson." "An apology is certainly warranted," Chief Patterson agreed. "But it's going to take much more than words to repair the damage you've done. Mr. Thompson isn't just any citizen you've wronged. He's a pillar of this community who has given everything he has to make life better for others." The chief pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. "I've been thinking about this all morning, and I've decided that both of you are going to have the opportunity to learn exactly who Walter Thompson is and what he means to this community. But first, you're going to experience some consequences for your actions." Steve looked up nervously. "Are we being suspended, Chief?" "You're both being reassigned effective immediately," Chief Patterson announced. "Johnson, you'll be working with our community outreach coordinator for the next month, visiting every senior center, community center, and neighborhood watch group in the city. You'll be listening to concerns, taking notes, and filing detailed reports about how we can better serve our elderly and vulnerable populations." Marcus felt his stomach sink. Community outreach was considered one of the least desirable assignments in the department, often given to officers as punishment. "Rodriguez, you'll be assigned to work with our youth programs. You'll be helping with after-school activities, summer camps, and educational visits to schools. You'll also be required to research and write a comprehensive report on the history of community policing in our city, including detailed information about every citizen volunteer who has contributed to public safety over the past 20 years. Steve realized that his assignment would likely include extensive research about Walter Thompson's contributions, making him confront his mistake over and over again. "But before either of you begins these assignments," Chief Patterson continued, "you're both going to accompany me on a visit to Walter Thompson's home. You're going to apologize in person, and you're going to listen to his neighborhood safety proposal with the respect and attention it deserves." The chief picked up his phone and dialed a number. After a few rings, a calm, dignified voice answered. "Mr. Thompson, this is Chief Patterson from the police department. I was wondering if I could stop by your home this afternoon to discuss your community safety proposal in more detail. I'd also like to bring the two officers you spoke with yesterday, so they can hear your ideas directly." Marcus and Steve could hear Walter's voice through the phone, though they couldn't make out the words. His tone sounded surprised but pleased. "Yes, sir," Chief Patterson continued. "I think there was a misunderstanding yesterday, and I'd like to clear it up, while also moving forward with your excellent ideas for community involvement. Would 2 o'clock work for you?" After a brief conversation, the chief hung up the phone and looked at both officers. "Mr. Thompson has graciously agreed to meet with us at his home this afternoon. He seemed surprised that we were taking his proposal seriously, which tells you something about how deeply your dismissive treatment affected him." The rest of the morning passed slowly for Marcus and Steve. They tried to focus on their regular duties, but their minds kept returning to their upcoming meeting with Walter Thompson. Other officers in the station noticed their subdued behavior but didn't know the reason behind it. Officer Sarah Chen approached Marcus during lunch. "Hey, you guys seem really quiet today. Everything okay?" Marcus looked at her with new understanding. "Sarah, yesterday when you said we were too harsh with that elderly man who came in, you were right. We should have listened to you." Sarah raised her eyebrows in surprise. "What happened? Did he file a complaint?" "Worse," Marcus replied. "We found out who he really is, and we feel like complete idiots." At 2 o'clock, Chief Patterson, Marcus Johnson, and Steve Rodriguez stood on the front porch of a modest but well-maintained house in one of the city's older neighborhoods. The yard was immaculate, with carefully tended flower beds and a small American flag hanging by the front door. Walter Thompson opened the door before they could knock, having seen them approach from his living room window. He was dressed in casual clothes but still carried himself with the same quiet dignity they remembered from the station. "Chief Patterson, officers," Walter said politely, stepping aside to let them in. "Please come in, I've made some coffee if you'd like some." The interior of Walter's home was modest but filled with mementos from a life of service. The walls displayed his teaching awards, photos of students over the years, and certificates of appreciation from various community organizations. In a place of honor above the fireplace hung his Medal of Honor, though it was displayed so naturally among other items that it didn't immediately draw attention. "Mr. Thompson," Chief Patterson began, "before we discuss your community safety proposal, Officers Johnson and Rodriguez have something they'd like to say to you." Walter looked at the two officers with curiosity, but no apparent hostility. Despite how they had treated him, he showed no signs of anger or resentment. Marcus stepped forward, his hands shaking slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I owe you a sincere apology. Yesterday, Officer Rodriguez and I treated you with disrespect and dismissed your concerns without giving them proper consideration. Our behavior was unprofessional and completely inappropriate." Steve nodded in agreement. "Sir, we made assumptions about you based on your age, and we were completely wrong. We failed to recognize that you were trying to help our community and our department. We're deeply sorry for our actions." Walter listened quietly, then gestured for all three men to sit down in his living room. "Officers, I appreciate your apologies. I admit that yesterday's encounter was hurtful, but I also understand that you're busy people dealing with serious crimes and situations. Perhaps I should have made an appointment instead of just walking in." The grace and humility in Walter's response made Marcus and Steve feel even worse about their behavior. Here was a man who had every right to be angry with them, instead taking partial responsibility for a situation that was entirely their fault. Walter Thompson moved to a wooden cabinet in the corner of his living room and pulled out a thick folder filled with neatly organized papers. As he walked back to where the three police officials sat, Marcus and Steve noticed the slight limp in his step, a reminder of his war injuries that they had completely missed during their cruel encounter the day before. "Chief Patterson, officers, let me show you what I had hoped to discuss yesterday," Walter said, settling into his favorite armchair with the care of someone whose joints carried decades of wear. "I've been working on this proposal for 6 months. Now, ever since the break-in started increasing in our neighborhood." He opened the folder and spread several handwritten pages across the coffee table. His handwriting was clear and precise, the work of a former teacher who understood the importance of clear communication. "The idea came to me when I realized how much knowledge and experience we senior citizens have that's going unused," Walter explained. "Many of us are retired professionals who spent decades in careers that gave us skills that could benefit community safety." Steve leaned forward, genuinely interested for the first time. The proposal was far more comprehensive and thoughtful than anything he had expected. "For example," Walter continued, "my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, worked as a bank manager for 35 years. She has an excellent eye for suspicious activity and understands financial crimes. Mr. Garcia down the street was an auto mechanic and can spot stolen or suspicious vehicles better than most people." Chief Patterson nodded appreciatively as Walter explained his vision. "So you're proposing a structured volunteer program where senior citizens use their professional expertise to assist with community policing?" "Exactly," Walter replied with enthusiasm. "We wouldn't be trying to do police work ourselves, but we could serve as trained observers and resources. We have time during the day when many working people aren't around to notice suspicious activity." He pulled out a hand-drawn map of the neighborhood with carefully marked locations. "I've already spoken with 23 residents who are interested in participating. We have a retired nurse who could help with basic first aid training, a former communications supervisor who understands radio protocols, and several people with military or security backgrounds." Marcus felt increasingly ashamed as he listened to the detailed, thoughtful proposal. Yesterday, he had assumed Walter was just another elderly person with vague complaints about safety. Instead, he had developed a comprehensive plan that could genuinely benefit the police department and the community. The beauty of this approach, Walter continued, is that we seniors are often home during the day when many crimes occur. We know our neighbors, we notice when something seems out of place, and we have the time to pay attention to details that busy people might miss. Walter pulled out another sheet of paper that listed specific qualifications and backgrounds of potential volunteers. The list included former teachers, military veterans, retired security guards, ex-business owners, and people with specialized skills ranging from accounting to electronics. "Mr. Thompson," Chief Patterson said with obvious admiration, "this is one of the most well-researched and practical community policing proposals I've seen in my 25 years in law enforcement. Why didn't you submit this through official channels instead of just walking into the station?" Walter smiled gently. "Chief, I'm 72 years old and I know how bureaucracy works. I thought if I could speak directly with officers and explain the idea face-to-face, it might get more serious consideration than a formal proposal that might sit in someone's inbox for months." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Walter had been trying to make their jobs easier by approaching them directly and personally, and they had treated him like a nuisance. "There's another aspect to this proposal that I think could be particularly valuable," Walter said, pulling out photographs of neighborhood meetings he had organized. "Many of the seniors in our community feel disconnected from local law enforcement. They remember when police officers walked beats and knew people by name. This program could help rebuild those relationships." Steve looked at the photographs, showing groups of elderly residents sitting in living rooms and community centers, discussing safety concerns and sharing information. "You've already been organizing these meetings?" "For the past 4 months," Walter confirmed. "Every other Wednesday evening, we gather to discuss neighborhood safety issues, share information about suspicious activities, and talk about ways we can help each other stay safe. We've already helped solve 2 cases by providing information about vehicles and people we've observed." Chief Patterson's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You've helped solve cases? What kind of cases?" Walter pulled out a small notebook filled with dates, times, and detailed observations. Mrs. Patterson noticed a van that came to the Johnson house every Tuesday morning when the family was at work. She wrote down the license plate and description. When the Johnsons reported a burglary, her information helped identify the suspects. He flipped through several pages of careful notes. "Mr. Williams observed teenagers breaking bottles behind the grocery store and recorded the times and descriptions. When the store manager reported vandalism, we provided information that helped identify the responsible parties." Marcus and Steve exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing. This group of elderly citizens was already doing more effective community policing than many trained officers. "The key," Walter explained, "is that we're not trying to be vigilantes or take any direct action. We simply observe, record, and report through proper channels. We understand our role is to be the eyes and ears of the community, not to enforce laws or confront criminals." Chief Patterson was impressed by the maturity and understanding Walter's group showed about the proper boundaries between citizen involvement and police work. "I also think this program could address another problem," Walter said thoughtfully. "Many young people in our community have negative perceptions of police officers based on media coverage and unfortunate incidents in other cities. If they see police working cooperatively with their grandparents and respected community elders, it might help build more positive relationships." The 3 police officials sat in Walter's living room, surrounded by evidence of a lifetime of service and community involvement, listening to ideas that could revolutionize their approach to community policing. The contrast between this moment and their dismissive treatment of Walter the day before was stark and humbling. "Mr. Thompson," Chief Patterson said finally, "I want to implement this program immediately. Would you be willing to serve as the coordinator for senior citizen volunteers?" Walter's face lit up with genuine joy. "Chief, I would be honored to help in any way I can." 6 months later, Officer Marcus Johnson stood in the same break room where he had once mocked Walter Thompson, but everything had changed. The walls now displayed photographs from community events, certificates of appreciation from senior citizen groups, and newspaper articles about the success of the Senior Watch program that Walter had created. Marcus was reviewing reports from the previous week's activities when Officer Sarah Chen approached him with a smile. "How did the neighborhood meeting go last night, Marcus?" "It was incredible, Sarah," Marcus replied, his voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. "We had 43 senior volunteers attend, and they provided information that helped us close 5 cases this week alone." Mrs. Henderson identified the person who's been stealing packages from doorsteps, and Mr. Garcia spotted the car involved in those hit-and-run incidents. The transformation in Marcus's attitude was complete. The man who had once dismissed elderly citizens as burdens had become one of the department's most effective community liaisons. His monthly assignment working with seniors had turned into a permanent position that he genuinely loved. Officer Steve Rodriguez walked over to join the conversation, carrying a folder filled with thank you letters from local schools. His assignment? Working with youth programs had also become permanent, and he had discovered a passion for education and crime prevention that he never knew he possessed. "You should see the latest letter from Lincoln Elementary," Steve said, showing them a colorful card signed by an entire 3rd grade class. "The kids are so excited about our safety education program. 3 of them want to become police officers when they grow up." The irony wasn't lost on Steve that Lincoln Elementary was the same school where Walter Thompson had taught for 30 years, inspiring countless children just as he was now inspiring a new generation. Chief Patterson entered the break room, carrying the morning newspaper with a broad smile on his face. "Have you all seen today's paper? There's a front-page article about our crime reduction statistics. Violent crime is down 18%, property crime is down 25%, and community satisfaction with police services is at an all-time high." He held up the newspaper, which featured a large photograph of Walter Thompson receiving a special recognition award from the mayor. The headline read, "Elderly Heroes Program Transforms Police Community Relations. Mr. Thompson deserves all the credit," Marcus said, looking at the photograph with deep respect. "When I think about how we treated him that first day, I'm still ashamed of myself, but I'm also grateful that he gave us a chance to learn and grow." The Senior Watch program had exceeded everyone's expectations. What started as Walter's simple idea to help his neighborhood had grown into a citywide initiative involving over 200 senior volunteers. The program had been featured in law enforcement journals and had been adopted by police departments in 12 other cities. More importantly, the relationships between police officers and community members had fundamentally changed. Officers no longer saw elderly citizens as complaints waiting to happen, but as valuable partners with decades of life experience and knowledge to contribute. Steve pulled out his phone and showed his colleagues a video message from one of his youth program participants. "This is Tommy Rodriguez, no relation to me. 6 months ago, he was heading down a bad path, getting into fights and skipping school. Now he's an honor roll student who wants to study criminal justice in college." The video showed a confident young man thanking Officer Rodriguez for believing in him and helping him see that police officers could be mentors and friends rather than enemies. Tommy credited the youth program with changing his entire outlook on life and his future possibilities. "The best part," Steve continued, "is that Mr. Thompson has been mentoring Tommy personally. They meet every Saturday morning at the library where Walter helps him with his homework and tells him stories about overcoming challenges. Tommy calls him Grandpa Walter now." Chief Patterson set down the newspaper and looked at both officers with pride. "You know, when I first called you into my office 6 months ago, I was angrier than I'd been in years. I was ready to suspend both of you or worse. But Mr. Thompson specifically asked me not to punish you harshly. He said everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes." Marcus felt a familiar pang of gratitude mixed with residual shame. Even after their terrible treatment of him, Walter had shown them grace and mercy, asking that they be given opportunities to grow rather than simply being punished. "Speaking of Mr. Thompson," Chief Patterson continued, "he's asked to meet with both of you this afternoon. He has a new proposal he wants to discuss." An hour later, Marcus and Steve found themselves back in Walter's living room, but this time they came as colleagues and friends rather than shame-faced officers seeking forgiveness. The room had changed too, with new photographs showing Walter at various police department events and community gatherings. Officers, friends, Walter said warmly, as he served them coffee in the same cups they had used during their first visit. I wanted to share some exciting news with you and get your thoughts on expanding our programs even further. Walter pulled out a letter with official state government letterhead. The governor has asked me to serve on a statewide committee to develop senior citizen involvement in community safety programs. They want to use our model as a template for rural and urban communities throughout the state. Steve's face lit up with excitement. Mr. Thompson, that's incredible. You're going to help communities all across the state. That's where I need your help, Walter said with a smile. The governor wants police officers who have experience with our program to serve as trainers for departments that want to implement similar initiatives. Would you both be interested in traveling around the state to teach other officers what you've learned? Marcus felt overwhelmed with emotion. 6 months ago, he had treated Walter with contempt and dismissal. Now, this remarkable man was offering him the opportunity to help spread their successful program to other communities, potentially improving police community relations across the entire state. Mr. Thompson, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, I would be honored to help with this program. But I have to ask, after the way Steve and I treated you initially, why are you giving us this opportunity? Walter leaned back in his chair and smiled with the wisdom that comes from decades of life experience. Marcus, I learned something very important during my years as a teacher. People aren't defined by their worst moments, but by their capacity to learn, grow, and become better. You and Steve have shown tremendous growth and dedication over these past months. He gestured toward the photographs on his walls showing the 2 officers working with community members at various events. More importantly, you've both developed genuine relationships with the people you serve. You understand now that every person who walks into that police station has value, regardless of their age, background, or appearance. Steve nodded earnestly. We've learned that lesson well, sir. We'll never make those assumptions about people. Again, I believe you, Walter said simply. And I think your experiences, both the mistakes you made and the growth you've shown, will help you connect with other officers who might struggle with similar attitudes. Chief Patterson, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. Mr. Thompson, the department would like to do something special to honor your contributions to our community. We're planning to name the Community Policing Division after you, and we'd like to present you with our highest civilian honor. Walter looked genuinely surprised and touched. Chief, that's very kind, but I don't need recognition. Seeing the positive changes in our community relationships is reward enough for me. Nevertheless, the chief continued, next month we're holding a special ceremony to celebrate the success of the Senior Watch program. The mayor will be there, along with representatives from all the communities that want to adopt our model. We hope you'll accept this recognition not just for yourself, but as a symbol of what civilian police cooperation can achieve. As the afternoon sun streamed through Walter's living room windows, the 4 men continued planning ways to expand and improve their community programs. The conversation was filled with mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine friendship. Marcus and Steve had learned that true police work wasn't about power or authority, but about service, humility, and building relationships with the people they were sworn to protect. Walter had shown them that every person, regardless of age or appearance, had something valuable to contribute to their community. Most importantly, they had all learned that mistakes, even serious ones, could become opportunities for growth and positive change when met with grace, forgiveness, and a genuine commitment to doing better. The elderly man they had once ridiculed had become their teacher, mentor, and friend, transforming not just their careers but their understanding of what it truly means to serve others.